All right, guys. Well, welcome to another CyberSec Tuesday. Today we got to talk on Discord Infostealers, specifically the PirateStealer. We have on here tonight doing the talk itself is Coded and In Wonder. So feel free to take it off, guys.
All right, thanks. So yes, we'll be talking about Discord Infostealers. Jump right into it, I guess. So who are we? We're some of the leadership for a project called Vaccinator, which was founded to fight malware on Discord. My name is N Wonder. I am a recent aerospace engineering grad, currently an electrical engineer for the US government. I'm a self-taught programmer and Discord community admin, and a big fan of Bulbasaur.
Hi, I'm Coded, aka Michael. I write a lot of our tooling. I work due to this project. I became a malware analyst for a sandboxing platform. Some people say I'm the best Go programmer. I'm not really, just really good at problem solving. I am a professional JavaScript hater because it's all JavaScript. It should be trashed. And I have way too much money to throw on random stupid hobbies.
I put the Go programmer thing in against his will. All right, so you may remember from last week, those of you who were here, the Inner Eye security people were talking about their work against PirateStealer. There was a little bit of mention of us actually in that one. Just for a rough overview, I guess, they were talking about certain skid groups that were stealing Discord tokens using the BBY Stealer or PirateStealer malware. And their efforts specifically involved mostly spying on the skids, using data collection with a tool called ArcLight that they created, and just generally making life harder for those guys. Today we'll be talking about our own story in a similar fashion, specifically our efforts against a different group called PirateStealer. So it all started in November of 2021. A friend of mine got a suspicious DM on Discord. It was pretty obviously a scam, but I hadn't seen this before. I'd been a member of the FishFish community, which was an anti-phishing group, for a little while, so I decided to ask about it in there. Another server member in there looked into it and found the webhook that it reports to, as well as the URL to the payload itself, the URL of the payload itself, which was hosted on GitHub. If you don't know how Discord webhooks work, they contain their own authentication, like they contain the token, and so they can be messaged to as well as deleted with nothing but the URL. So if you delete the URL, then it deletes their entire C2 essentially, and invalidates the malware build. So it turned out this malware is one called PirateStealer. Once we found the GitHub repository that this was all hosted on, we were kind of hooked just looking into all the different stuff that we found in it. That image on the right was actually in the source code that was inside of the executable file. Just thought it was kind of funny that it literally has a screenshot of how the tool works inside of the exe. So looking a little deeper into that GitHub page, there was some really interesting stuff right off the bat. This is just a couple of the highlights from the README. First off, it's very amusing, the proof of concept and educational purposes only. Truly a airtight defense against accusations of cybercrime. It was also just really interesting that this dude was running essentially a malware repository, like a proper open source project, just completely in the open, even using like tags in GitHub releases to try to advertise and like properly changelog his malware. But this here is my favorite part. The repository, specifically the README, also had this section here called Skids Hall. There's just something amazing about cyber criminals being salty about their code being stolen. It just made me incredibly happy. This was also my introduction to the word skid. Before this point, I had never heard that as a term for a script kiddie. We'll be hearing that quite a bit, though. It's also here that we were introduced to the real villain of our story, a guy named Stanley, which was his online handle. It turned out he was the actual creator of PirateStealer, and despite apparently quitting, he kind of actually came back pretty much a little bit after we got introduced to PirateStealer. So throughout the next week or so, some of my new friends and I started messing with this guy, mostly just by reporting their Discord support servers. So they were creating new servers and putting them back up on the README quite a bit. We'd also be deleting their webhooks whenever we could, but that was a little bit less common as we weren't seeing too many malware samples at that point. Here's a little sample of the names they were giving their servers. You'll see I very much enjoyed TOS extremists, as well as their discord.gg/racismhq, which was the very first Discord invite link that they used the day that I found PirateStealer for the first time. Also, don't tell Stanley, but I may have been the one uploading his files to VirusTotal. He was a little salty about that. It was getting him detected a little bit quicker than he liked.
So the Skid business model is mainly Skid will make a shitty JavaScript malware, and then try to sell it to other Skids to make profit and try to sell their game. Try to buy the game. And then also their main focus was mainly Discord badges, because for funny pixel colors makes me happy and gives me serotonin to them for some reason. But that's their mindset. They were selling it for averagely $30, $25 I saw once in a while. And then when they added more features of targeting different versions of Discord, they were also charging more for that. Normal malware as a service, for sure. Next slide. So how does Grabbers work? They basically just enumerate all the known Discord paths. So there's Canary, there's PTB, there's Beta, there's other versions. You can actually most of them are actually publicly accessible. You can just download them from Discord's website, but not all of them. There's one that's really hidden. How does it? And then it injects the JavaScript payload into the index.js. Because it's just Discord is written on Electron. So the first thing it does is runs the JavaScript file. So if you inject any payload into the JavaScript file, then boom, you have basically all access as the actual application is. Just no note. As we mentioned last week, Spotify, Slack, anything that's written if Electron can be exploited the same exact way, or injected with a payload. It's actually how Spicify does their theming. And then it also just kills and restarts Discord after injecting the payload. Discord client, and then executes the payload. And then what the payload does is steals your Discord token, authentication token. And then it adds hooks to credit cards, logins, basically any identification form you've got to fill out in Discord. Sometimes in the future, they added features where it'll automatically log you out. This way, they can steal your password and try using your password for other services as well. And then after that, who knows what else they added? They kept on adding new features, obfuscating it, so it's a little more harder to find out. But then, of course, they wanted profit, because that's what a 13-year-old kid wants.
And by profit, it means Discord badges, because that's what the Skids are really after.
Yeah, apparently. shiny colors.
So we're actually going to take a short detour here and look into an actual sample. Assuming Discord cooperates, we'll have a live demo. Yeah, nice. That should have switched over to Malcat now. Just quick confirm, I guess, if anyone can.
Yep.
Yeah, looks like it. Okay, perfect. So this here is, I'm looking at a sample of PirateStealer, a pretty old one actually. This is from December of 2021. This is very shortly after we first started looking into all of this. One thing to note, just because it's kind of funny, for some reason it used what I think is the Fur Affinity logo as the executable icon. Not sure why, but they had a couple of random things like that. I think they like to try to blame these things on furries sometimes. They enjoyed hating on furries as well as certain races.
Yeah, they had a big hate for furries. At one point, I think I remember BBY changed their names into Furry Game. If you ever heard that EXE
Right,
go
yes.
around.
There's also, yeah. Also of note in here, I guess, as we're going through a tour of this executable file here, you'll note it's a node.js executable, and it's packed with a tool called nexe. That's what that .nexe is in that path there. So if we look into the actual hex code of it in the hex editor, you'll see nexe sentinel down here. This is an indicator that we were using to detect detect files that were built with this compiler, which several of them were, including PirateStealer and BabyStealer. Once we detected this, we were able to use an extractor tool to get access to the source code, because the skids are very smart, and they used a builder that essentially just packs the node.js runtime and all of the libraries and your source code into an executable file. And so this right here is the source code of the malware. As we're taking a look into it, you'll see it's obfuscated, which we're going to look into in a moment now, because I also have this prepared. Nice. So this is the obfuscated source code that was extracted from that executable file that was built with nexe. One thing to note that's kind of just entertaining, this isn't a great obfuscator. You've got a lot of function names that were preserved. Like, for example, list discords is in here. The function is still called infect. And even some of the string values are pretty obviously just strings added together. So this, for example, PirateStealer.ru looks like over here. There was also see if I can find another one. Yeah, you've also got child process over here. There's a couple things that are fairly easy to tell what's going on, and even just some strings that were preserved that you could use to detect this malware, even if it's obfuscated. But we also have the deobfuscated version of the same code. So this is the code that was inside of the nexe executable file. This is the code that when you download the malware and run it, gets executed. It is this is from before it's been configured. This wasn't actually deobfuscated. This is the original source code that we got from the skids. But essentially, you've got the webhook in here. You got some config data. And we'll now look through some of the actual interesting stuff we've got in here. First off, of note, that list discords function. If you look at it, it basically just goes through your processes and checks to see if it can find Discord or Discord Canary or development or PTD. And so no matter which Discord client you're using, it will get into it, including actually better Discord. So if you're using a modded client, this one specifically is also set up in order to steal tokens from that. One of the more interesting functions is that original infect function. So this one here essentially downloads a JavaScript file called injection.js, which is the payload that gets injected into Discord. This infect function just downloads that directly from GitHub and then writes it into the Discord directory itself. Specifically, it writes it into Discord's index.js file. It just appends it to the end, I believe. We also have kill Discord and start Discord, which do exactly what you would think. It closes and reopens Discord. You'll see, we search for There it is. So as part of that list discords function that we looked at, it also closes Discord, infects it, and then reopens it as part of that infect function. And as I mentioned, Code Embedder Discord does what it sounds like it does. It also injects the same injection into modded clients. That's essentially all this file does. It's not too complicated. It's just doing the injection and then force restarting the application. The rest of the malware is inside of that injection, though. So this is the code that gets put into your Discord installation itself. And so every time you run Discord, this is included in it. First thing that happens is a function called first time getting executed, which is here. So the first time you boot up Discord after being infected, this is it. The malware essentially setting itself up for the first time and reporting that a new user's been infected. First thing it does is it sends the webhook confirming that the system has been infected, and if it's able to get a token, it will send that as well. So that's if there's no token, and so if it's able to get a token, it goes in and it basically runs some code in the browser or inside the app, inside the Discord console, that grabs a token and then sends it to their webhook. After doing that, on the first time it's executed, it also logs the user out. So the injection or the injector, the main malware, will force restart Discord in order to make it run the injection. Then the injection will run, report what it can get, and log you out if it needs to, which forces you to log yourself back in if you don't know that you've run malware. And so then, when the user goes to log back in after they've been logged out, this malware also steals their password, which we will see now. So down here, there's change password filter, which is effectively just a list of authentication-related URLs that Discord uses in their API. And so every time a web request is completed by the browser, or by the Discord client, sorry, that matches a Discord authentication URL, one of these functions is executed. So you've got change password or change email. So essentially, every time you log in, it calls this login function. If you change your password, it also collects the new password. And if you change your email, it collects your new email and your password again. The whole point of the skid getting your password is so they can log into your account and change either your password or your email and then try to keep your account instead of just having it be lost once you change your password and have the token get reset, which is normally what would happen. Inside one of those functions, so for example, look at login. I'll also note here, this isn't great code. It's pretty obviously a trash JavaScript code. It's a little messy. It's also a 1,000-line file with a lot of copy-pasted stuff between these. Pretty clearly made by a kid, to be honest, but I'm not here to judge too hard. So it did work, admittedly. So looking inside one of these functions that does the stealing when you log back into Discord, first thing it does is it checks authorization. This is grabbing the token, I believe. Yeah, it's doing the identify endpoint. It grabs your IP, and then it pulls your payment sources and your linked accounts from your account profile or settings. I mean, your Discord settings. It also, interestingly, it resets your 2FA codes. And so they steal not just your email, password, and authentication token and try to get information about your credit card. They're also resetting your two-factor authentication codes, and so you can't recover your account as easily, or they can try to use that recovery in order to get access to it and change your email and password to steal it permanently. Also, interestingly, those 2FA codes are not reported to the webhook. It seems that you have to go onto their site to grab those. I don't believe he was charging extra for access to the two-factor authentication codes, but I don't remember. But regardless, he was sending those to himself. For whatever reason, he wanted to do that. I believe that is the majority of the interesting stuff that I planned to go over for this file. There's also a couple of other interesting functions in here. So you'll see, like, it specifically is looking for the rare badges on your account. Like, for example, if you're a Discord employee or a partner, or have the bug hunter or early supporter badge. It's also collecting the other ones. But even just separating the normal badges from the quote-unquote rare badges, which is what our badges is for, kind of shows what they're targeting and the types of people that they're targeting with these attacks. Because they do, in fact, primarily just want those badges. All right. Let me switch back.
Discord is now doing some stuff to combat this. I have not looked into most of this stuff in a while, because day job stuff, but they have made some mitigations for this.
Some of these things that the skids were doing are no longer possible. Discord used to, it used to be easier to change your password, reset your two-factor authentication codes, and I believe you could see more information in your payment details. So they've been putting more and more things behind more layers of security. So you can't, for example, change two-factor authentication codes. Or I guess, so for an example, you can't change your password without two-factor authentication codes now. I believe they added that in specifically because previously you could actually automate changing someone's password just by grabbing the password when they log in and then having their browser or having their Discord client change their password on them. Previously, when the endpoint used to only require token and password. So back to this. We've got the fact that I kind of hinted to when going over these files. They started obfuscating the JavaScript at some point. We weren't able to just pull out the webhooks with like grep or something, which is literally what we were doing for a little while. And so we kind of got hooked and we're like, okay, let's see if we can figure out how to crack this. So we had a couple ideas. We started out, there were a few people who were manually deobfuscating the JavaScript, manually deobfuscating the JavaScript source code. There are also JavaScript deobfuscator tools. And when the obfuscation was a little bit worse, those tools tended to work pretty well. But eventually they realized which tools were the better ones, and it was a little harder to crack. And of course we thought about sandboxing, because that's the hardest thing to bypass with malware. But unfortunately it's also difficult to set up and somewhat expensive. But then at some point we realized this malware is literally just JavaScript source code. And JavaScript is a dynamic programming language with a runtime. So we thought, what if we just made the malware do something else? And so the original idea was essentially that. Because the malware contained the JavaScript source code the obfuscated source, as well as all of the node modules that are used by the malware. We thought, what if we just edited, say, the Axios, which is the HTTP library they were using, source code, and instead of having it do the HTTP request, had it just print the URL that it was setting it to. So we had a couple of ideas, but the basic idea was run something before the malware, monkey patch the runtime, then run the malware. So when we were looking for a point to inject into, we were originally thinking the HTTP requests, because that's the one that most obviously had the URL passed into it. But we eventually realized the first call in that source code that I showed you that has the webhook is not HTTP. It's that fs.writeFileSync here, which does the infection of your Discord client. And so initially that was our injection point into the malware. That was the function call that we replaced with a print function in order to print out the webhooks that the skids were using. It also prevented us from getting errors from this malware because we were kind of messing with the runtime and messing with the malware and running it in a weird situation. We did sometimes have it erroring out. And so putting it in the very first operation that could be failing was a pretty useful point. We didn't have to worry about file IO errors or even really HTTP errors, although it did do the https.get up here. And so the vaccinator was born. This was a web-based tool that we made that did basically exactly what I described. You'd be able to upload a malware file, and it would extract the obfuscated source code from the malware, and then it would start up a node.js runtime, monkey patch the runtime to change a bunch of built-in functions and whatnot to report things for us, and then it would just run the malware in a sandbox. And so it was something of a custom sandbox that was basically just a VM that we had set up, that we didn't have anything insecure or anything to worry about on it. One of our friends at one point suggested we call it the vaccinator because we were using that injection tactic. And honestly, that was also kind of perfect because you're kind of neutralizing that build of malware for everybody, aka vaccinating or immunizing. It was kind of a great name for it. And so that's what we went along with. And so that's where the project name came from. So here's a look at what the results looked like for the vaccinator after you uploaded a file. You could see the very first thing it gave you was the webhook, and it would tell you, yes, we deleted it because we got it out. That was very much the focus of this tool, automatically extracting and deleting those webhooks. We did have other information in here too. We did get webhook information, as well as extracting other URLs that may be useful from the binary throughout the analysis process. Some samples didn't have the webhooks some samples didn't use Discord webhooks. So for an example, this is a PirateStealer sample. And even as early as I think December, they were using their own C2 links. And so while we weren't able to delete those and essentially shut it down for everybody, we were still able to keep track of the C2s for a lot of other groups. If you were at the talk last week, PirateStealer is the one that was mentioned. And so they were using these bby.rip URLs for a while. So once we had a functioning tool, we started sharing it around, primarily in mod circles, but other places too. PhishFish was a relatively established project at this point, the anti-phishing project. And so that was a huge help for essentially helping other moderators find this tool and know what to do when they saw this kind of scam. And so we were getting a good amount of data collected from this, a good amount of webhooks deleted, and we were making a ton of new friends. And we were meeting a bunch of new people outside of the mod communities as well. Notably, there were people on VirusTotal and GitHub who either we were finding and seeing doing their own work against this malware, or who were finding us. So a good example of that is the guys from last week who saw me, I believe, on VirusTotal and sent me an email, as well as Coded, who was doing his own work against these quabbers. And we ended up finding him, and he joined us pretty much at this point in the project and has been around ever since. We also met some people in more interesting ways. There were a couple people who were literally just messing with Stan on Twitter, and we thought it was hilarious and invited them to join us, and ended up being incredibly useful assets later on. There were a couple people who were also messing around with the skids in their support servers on Discord, which was far braver than I was willing to be, putting their Discord accounts at risk, but always entertaining. And there were a couple other research groups, actually, that we found and ended up kind of absorbing, for lack of a better term. So, oops, we have a community now. That was always funny.
So, because of me, not just me coming in, due to the nature of the malware being shared and spread different ways of DMs and fake game sites and other things, a bunch of us started making tools and automations of like uploading samples to Vaccinator. Here we do have some screenshots of some of like the fake game websites being tracking their diffing their file, their source code for new links and uploading the new links to Vaccinator. Also, whenever some of the Git repositories we found of malware get updated, we start pushing that up, and then also just analyzing it manually. Then we also ended up doing a lot of other automation stuff. So we ended up automating tweets of these malware developers have into their own channels, but we'll get more into that in a little bit. Like when I joined on, I start off with fake alias because I don't want to deal with malware authors trying to dox me and stuff. So I decided to make an alias and gave that up real quick though. When I decided to, what's the right word? Not give hell anymore. Yeah. So my next project my first project when I came in was this project called HIO, which would be the next slide. So HIO is a indie game platform that you can upload a game to and let people play, download, distribute whatever you want to do. And I've noticed a lot of samples being shared on there. So I ended up making the tool using their API, their non-public API, me running over 30,000 games, and averagely about a new sample every hour or so, which was pretty surprisingly. Due to this, became friends with the CEO, and we automated a whole tool to automatically report them, and within an hour of them uploading the game, it would automatically be deleted off their site. We even tried talking to them and trying to automate a system so that their system automatically uploads samples to us, but they said their system couldn't be doing it. But also, some of these malware scammers put these fake images saying we were Discord scammers to make it seem like their game is not a scam, even though it was. But that one's actually the original one from HIO.
HIO adding that warning to all of their links. So they changed their HTML for every game in order to have the Discord embeds show that beware Discord scammers image, which seems like a fairly small gesture, but given how much malware was on their platform, specifically involving these Discord token stealers, this was a huge deal. Like, this forced them to not let their links embed, which is also just one little thing that makes it a little bit more clear to the victims hey, something's up. And if they did accidentally let it embed, then these people would literally see, hey, check out this URL, read our blog post about Discord scams. This is a little sus that this guy's sending you an email or sending you a DM.
So, our friends from last week mentioned, we had a week of taking down their C2s and VPSs constantly. So we've reported all of their servers to Discord. We've taken their domain down, their C2 domains down every week. We've gotten their infrastructure deleted. We've used Sensi, we use Shodan. We've developed some tools to scan constantly. If we've noticed some of them using the same hosting provider, we'll just start scanning their whole IP range constantly. It also has like some information due to that as well. Like so there are some of the side projects, and that's how we can find some of their personal identification information. Next one. And Stanley, the creator of PirateStealer, this is from that 2-week process of us hitting his everything he ever owned down. And he publicly posted on his Twitter these stats of like 1C2 being up for 3 days, 5 days, and then some of the VPSs we've been taking down constantly. Even ones that were supposedly privacy oriented, like Naja or Crazy RDP, was never really a thing if you can talk to them correctly. But we made him waste a lot of money over that 2-week period. This one, he's actually under quoted how much he spent, but it actually was more than that later on in the future.
We were also doing these takedowns for longer than a 2-week period, but there was that 2-week period was him buying things a lot and then being taken down quickly. I think it's absolutely amazing that this dude tweeted basically saying, hey, look at all the domains and VPSs you took down and what it cost me. My favorite one probably, PirateStealer.com was only active for 2 hours. I think we had some people notice that and report it pretty much immediately. It barely made it 2 hours before it was terminated by Namecheap, which is just fantastic.
Also, during this reporting constantly, we ended up becoming friends with some staff at Cloudflare, Namecheap. So getting these domains and takedowns were pretty quick. When we got into the flow of it, it was just instantly done. Like again, like the 2-hour one was pretty impressive as well, I think.
Yeah, we made a lot of friends at other companies, or just at companies that were being used by the skids, and it was pretty helpful to get expedited reports on these things. So some of these we got very quick takedowns, and it only got better as we made more friends.
Also, a little insider information: you can also tweet at DM Namecheap's Twitter account, and they will take down stuff right away, or respond right away at least.
Shout out to Namecheap's Twitter for taking trust and safety reports and dealing with them quickly.
Yeah, email, their report system sucks. Twitter is the way to go, or X now.
So with all of these webhook deletions in particular, the skids were starting to get pretty frustrated. You'll notice that BBY, if you remember, was using that bby.rip link. Part of that was because these groups were getting tired of webhooks being deleted. So they thought, okay, let's add a webhook protection feature and proxy it through a VPS. And so this image right here is showing this stealer.re link is the proxy. This became the new webhook that was inside the malware. This was one we got by actually putting in one of our own webhooks in order to test, because we had access to the panel. And the screenshot, the image on the right there is what their panel looked like. At the bottom there's the new setting called webhook protection, which made it use the stealer.re proxy instead of the Discord webhook when it built the malware. I don't know if I mentioned that yet, but they were building this malware for their customers from a web panel. So their customers would literally log into like PirateStealer.com at one point and like pay him and then log in and generate malware and download it to give to people. So Stan kind of had a problem here. He has a couple of options for how to get his customers' victims' data to the customers. What he was originally doing, putting the Discord webhooks in the malware, had a couple of issues because they were able to be found by us and deleted, even if they were obfuscated, as I mentioned, which was causing his customers a lot of grief. But if he proxies them through a service, while it does protect his customers' webhooks, it makes the C2 pretty obvious. Because a lot of malware scanners, especially the sandboxes, for example, the commercial sandboxes used by like VirusTotal and hybrid analysis and stuff, will literally show you, oh, a web request or a DNS request was made to this domain. And so the C2 became visible literally without any advanced analysis, and you could literally just run it in VirusTotal, find the domain, report it. So that was also part of why we were deleting so many of his domains. He started proxying it, and it was incredibly easy to find those C2s. He also opened himself up to some shenanigans. Because remember, we could also access this dashboard as quote-unquote customers of his. For example, if we generated our own malware, and instead of a Discord webhook, put in one of our own webhooks, then we'd be able to get the IP of his C2. And even if it's behind Cloudflare, we could get his hosting provider to take down his VPSs. And so one of the ways we were deleting his VPSs was essentially this. We would make a webhook.site link and put that into the web panel, generate malware, and run it. And when the fake account got quabbed, we would also get a request. We would end up getting our request to webhook.site from the IP of his VPS, his proxy system. And so, in addition to being able to report his Discord servers and his domains, we were able to report his servers, his VPSs. Also, if you look back at what this was, this string after /webhook in that URL turned out to be an encrypted string containing the value of the webhook itself. Literally just the entire webhook URL as an AES encrypted string. Now, AES requires three things to work. You need the input string, the secret key, and what's called an initialization vector. The IV, or initialization vector, was reused by him. It was only generated at startup of his backend. And it was included in the URL. So it was revealed to us. And so if we were able to get a known input and a known IV and a known output, which we were through the panel, we were able to generate a functional decryption key. And so we could, even if he was putting things behind a proxy, we were still able to get the webhooks from those URLs just by decrypting them. Sure, it would be a shame, huh? Sure, it would be a shame if we automated that process, started deleting his customers' webhooks, even with Stealer protection, or even with webhook protection active. So we were planning on potentially doing another demo of a Quabber. Coded here might be having some technical difficulties, so we'll have to see.
I can't do it, and also that sample is gone now.
Oh, still not. Oh, damn. Okay, never mind then. Unfortunate. Luckily, we do have some other fun stories to talk about, of course. So a funny result of that decryption system I mentioned was that we were watching his backend in order to detect when the IVs were changing. And every time he restarted the backend, the IV would change. So we could see effectively how much he was working on PirateStealer over time just by graphing the IV changes and what hours they happened over, say, a week or two. And so we were able to figure out when he worked on PirateStealer and when he was sleeping. Pretty much from that. Just thought that was a little interesting. Would you like to talk about Crazy RDP or shall I?
I don't remember much about Crazy RDP, but I can go on it. So Crazy RDP boasts to be an unstoppable, can't be taken down VPS system provider. Turns out they're incorrect. They just resell some other companies. Can't remember the name right now off the top of my head. If you do some digging, you can pretty much find it out. But we ended up going through and finding out their provider, and got reports through them instead. So Crazy RDP being unstoppable, it's not unstoppable for malware, and they do boast about being hosting for malware as well. And there's some piece on their website that was like, "Can we run malware?" There and the FAQ something like that. It was like, "Yeah, you can. We don't shine away from it."
So this was their site last week. They no longer claim complete immunity. They no longer advertise that like you can run malware. But I believe they did quite literally say like, even if you're committing crimes, we will not take your VPS down. Which is honestly very funny because they were a reseller and they didn't have their own ASN, we were able to, just from the IP, figure out which company they were reselling and get the VPSs taken down, bypassing Crazy RDP entirely. Which made Stan a little angry. When he was getting stuff taken down, he was salty. He started tweeting angrily at Crazy RDP. And we just got this amazing OPSEC moment here. So this was him posting their support ticket onto Twitter for everyone to see. For Crazy RDP, a company that was reselling a VPS service to people who are committing crimes. And this guy specifically on Twitter would constantly be... His tweets were mostly about his cybercrime. He was very openly running PirateStealer, a malware service, on Twitter, talking about which hosting providers he was using, including some that were trying to not get in trouble with law enforcement. So we had this incredible moment here on the right, which was Crazy RDP in a support thread saying, "Please remove your tweet. Why would you even post this? I got an abuse claim regarding PirateStealer. Please take action." And they were pretty mad at him, seemingly. And so he made this tweet afterwards. And we had a little fun with that one as well. I don't know if you can tell there might have been a little bit of shenanigans at play here.
His OPSEC was never the best. There have been times where we've gotten screenshots of himself with a Snapchat location of his actual address and some other OPSEC stuff. So we'll get more into that in a bit, in a few seconds too. But yeah, his OPSEC was not existent for sure. There was a time where near the end of his escapades, he came to New York City, and me being a New York City native, he kept on posting pictures of places he was in New York City, like outside his hotel room. And of course, instantly within 5 minutes, I'm in our private channels, like showing the exact hotel room and everything. Yeah, don't post pictures of your location online if you don't want people to look at them. Just general OPSEC.
Also, don't post selfies in your Discord server if you're openly a cybercriminal. Just a pro tip for you. Another fun thing we found, the actual build links, or the links to the downloads for the builds were using essentially this was on his VPS. He was serving files from the same server he was running everything else on. And he implemented the file IO himself. He didn't use like a secure one. And so his system was at first vulnerable to path traversal. And we may or may not have been able to get access to the backend code for his web server, for his builder. which is what's there on the right, or at least the start of it. I could show that off a little bit as well after the talk. After he realized we were doing this to get access to certain information on a system, he bypassed it. But instead of using something secure, I believe he just started looking for certain strings in the path after that ID in the URL. And he made it return this amazing text instead of the file, which is incredibly funny. You could tell he was a little bit salty. Would you like this one, or shall I?
You can take it.
Okay, this was another great one. So, last week, again, the guys mentioned that Bruno from PirateStealer was dual hooking his malware, basically meaning he was stealing certain accounts from his customers instead of sending the stolen tokens to them. Before we found this out, like I think a few days, Stan tweeted that he was selling PirateStealer to Bruno from PirateStealer for $4,500. Not sure how accurate that is, but if he was making that kind of money, I'm sure the authorities would be very interested in him. Shortly after he sold that, we found out that Bruno was dual hooking the malware, and we got evidence of it. And so one of the people in our community made a very popular, made a GitHub post about it, calling him out on it. You can see that on the bottom left there, at least a TLDR from the bottom of it. He had a whole expose that ended up being very popular with the skids. But it was very entertaining. So after this information got out, Stan, who had sold PirateStealer to Bruno, said, "All right, just kidding. I'm taking back PirateStealer." And so he presumably took the money and decided, I'm gonna come back anyway and bring back PirateStealer. And so that's what's on the bottom right there. Him on Telegram basically saying, "Hey, I'm coming back. Fuck Bruno." The censored word there may or may not be a slur, because that's how the skids like to operate. Just a fun fact. That's just some skid drama.
So we've built a lot of tools out of this. Some of the projects notably is the anti-Stanley proxy, which was a Cloudflare worker. Literally just proxies our requests to it, to whatever domain, whatever site we wanted to. ArcLight, which is the guys from last week. We also built other tools, monitoring GitHub commits, HTML changes, DNS changes, the HIO numerator. We ended up getting enterprise access through a friend at a security company, and to automate all the YAROs for BBY, PirateStealer, and all the other Discord token stealers. We ended up also making a tool to track Discord invite links. You can via Discord's API, you can look at the stats on it, pull some general information from it. Well, and we also monitor some of the no name ones, just for clear idea, like to watch to see if some servers get deleted or not. One of us has made a tool to track the Discord support forms. Discord support forms constantly changes because it's a software as a service, so it happens. As I mentioned before, we have automated Stan's Twitter account to one of our Discord channels as well. We have all this stuff that integrated with other things like ArcLight. We had something integrated with ArcLight, which were whenever somebody uses their trial builder, they have to publicly post the webhook link. And we had a random timer after X amount of time, it will automatically delete the webhook, so no potential victims can be victimized. There's a lot of stuff that came out of these projects. They're still constantly going on. A notable one, we have made a version 2.0 kind of the Vaccinator project. Actually does even more JavaScript funky stuff. Prototypes on top of prototypes on top of prototypes to prototype arrays and objects, because JavaScript is a dynamically typed language.
So I guess from this slide, I gotta say my favorite thing by far that we've done, that we've automated, was automatically forwarding Stan's tweets into our PirateStealer chat channel. We had a dedicated channel for fighting PirateStealer, and just having it interrupted sometimes when we were having a conversation with this random kid tweeting some absolutely insane shit was just kind of incredible. Plus, it gave us some useful information, and when he eventually deleted all of his tweets, we had a Discord-based archive. A lot of his tweets in this presentation were either from screenshots we took at the time or from our archives of his tweets, because they're no longer live. There are also a couple that were taken from, I believe, the Internet Archive, which also should have it. All right. In conclusion, so this presentation honestly mostly just covered the first few months of this project. I'm talking like November 2021 to maybe March of 2022. There's been a whole lot that's happened even during that time frame that hasn't been covered with other groups, as well as a whole lot that's happened since then. Things might have slowed down a little bit in the years since then, but working on this presentation really got me thinking about the impact of everything we've done. We've neutralized essentially thousands of malware files. I think I have an archive of 1,200 right now, hours on my laptop. We took down dozens of skid domains and VPSs, wasting presumably thousands of dollars of their money. Multiple cybercrime groups are now gone, at least in my opinion, due to us, or partially due to us. Of course, a whole lot of memes and in-jokes. And I like to think, hopefully, an internet that's just a little bit safer than it was when we first started all of this. And looking back at everything, especially all of the memes, I realized maybe the real vaccinator was the friends we made along the way.
Oh, dude, that's hilarious and awesome.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Hope you enjoyed.
Thank you.
We'll be sticking around for questions and also to go over some more slides that can't be or probably shouldn't